Hey, I'm Dines, and we're gonna talk about the Netflix show Arcane again, but this time it will be a bit different. We'll do an in-depth exploration, and we'll cover some basic writing terms on the way. If you're interested in themes, sub-themes, archetypes, and depiction of mental health in media, stick around, we're gonna get right to it. But first, I have to warn you, spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen the show, just go ahead and watch it, come back to this video later, I think you won't be disappointed. In the show, or in this video. So let's start with this simple concept. What is theme in film? It is a central message, the creator's vision, something that the entire picture is structured around. Everything that is in a movie revolves around the theme. And everything you experience is basically a vehicle to get you there. Music, visual style, tone, and most importantly, the plot or the story. It's not something vague either. Love is not a theme. Love is not like in the movies, is. Heroism is not a theme. True power comes from the heart, is. The theme is usually a singular topic that we explore through the medium and make a statement about. In an interview, Alex Yee, one of the writers and showrunners of Arcane, talks about the theme of the series being duality. Duality is everywhere in this story, and it's not just on a surface level. Piltover's high society and Zaun's low lives contrast each other, but it doesn't stop there. If we zoom in, we can see Zaun is also fragmented along the lines of the powerful and the powerless. Hell, if we zoom in even more, we can see how Silco is in opposition with himself. Loving father of a girl, and someone who sacrifices it all for his people. This very duality will be his undoing. And this was just one example of the almost Mandelbrottian fractal of this theme. It is all around the show. Most dominantly, it is present in Jinx, who most literally has a split personality, brought on by triggers of her PTSD. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, first of all, didn't I just say that a theme is a deeper interpretation of a single topic? Well, yes, but that doesn't mean we can't take smaller pieces and break them down even further. And that's what we're gonna do. These are called sub-themes, and they're basically like smaller individual themes that all tie into the main message, giving it more depth and enhancing it in many different ways. They are usually more specific than the central general theme. Take this example from screenwriter Scott Meyer's blog post where he says, "The clearest articulation of the Shawshank Redemption's central theme is get busy living or get busy dying, which is amplified by sub-themes of transformation, cynicism to hope, self-deception to self-honesty, and institutionalization, among others, giving us the most accurate final message. Salvation lies within." So think of the theme-sub-theme relation like an umbrella. Each panel of the umbrella is a sub-theme that builds into the overarching message, and even if there is a shaft that holds the entire thing up, it all points in the same direction and ultimately serves the same purpose. They all protect you from the rain, so to speak. Wow, terrible analogy, thank you, Dines. So, let's look beyond what we see at first glance and go deeper. I broke down the theme of Arcane, duality, into 3 sub-themes, and they roughly correspond to 3 plots. Although there is overlap between them, for the purpose of this video I will isolate them to keep it simpler. This video is about theme number 1, trauma, Jinx's story. I consider this the central plot of the show, and not just because of her. Arcane is about many things, but trauma is one of the main driving forces of the story. Trauma we inherit, trauma that defines us, trauma of our history, and even trauma processed. But what is it about trauma that Arcane communicates? Countless times in media, we have seen how mental health disorders stem from childhood trauma, or the anti-hero's complicated past. The scale goes from informing, to justifying, to outright glorifying, and this is worth a discussion of its own. But Arcane raises the question of agency, which is somewhat provocative, or at least unusual for mainstream depictions of psychological disorders. Powder didn't choose to be somewhat clumsy and useless, and she's also a child. But she had a loving, supporting family, or as close as you can get to that in the Undercity. She didn't choose to be born into this. She didn't choose to be disrespected and marginalized by society. And yet, there she was. The first choice she made was stealing, although due to peer pressure. The next real choice was to help her family and kill a bunch of people if that was the price. And then she was set on the road to damnation and living as a lowlife, and with Silco as her ward, and the traumatic event behind her, she chose to give up autonomy. She was going to be Silco's daughter, and the pawn in the game he was playing. But this didn't doom Jinx. She wasn't gone. As the events of Arcane transpire, she's gradually given agency again. Her decisions came to carry weight, and now she had to decide on her own actions, morals, and personality. She had to choose Jinx over Powder, choose disassociation over facing her trauma. Her trauma, of course, is manifested right in front of her eyes. Her sister Vi will challenge her choices every time she walks down the path of Jinx, and Silco, in return, will question them every time she walks down the path of Powder. The point is, the show tells us very clearly that Jinx has a choice to turn back on this road. That's the exact thing that gives this plot tension. This is why the storyline feels refreshing to me. In a sea of narratives that romanticize mental health disorders and justify inhumanity on the basis of psychosis, Arcane holds Jinx accountable and gives her agency even in the shadow of PTSD and a traumatic childhood. I'll talk more about this later. So Jinx can turn the events of the story around anytime she wants to. All it would take is one decision. And how does this enhance the theme of duality? Let's take the classic story structure of hero, obstacle, goal. In the simplest sense, our hero is Powder, our obstacle is Jinx, and our goal is Powder. This is why the theme of duality works so well in this plot. We literally see a person break in half as a child, and the dramatic question that the story asks is, will she be whole again? As this is a tragic story, the answer will be no, as we understand it at the end of Season 1. But the duality of this character provides the tension in the story all on its own. Our protagonist is our antagonist, and our hero is our anti-hero. Now that we took apart Jinx from a story point of view, let's see what type of character she really is. How do you write a protagonist that also works as an antagonist? The archetype of the fallen hero is a common one. It basically reflects on antagonists in a more realistic way. They are also human beings, and the source of their rotten nature is a tragic event in the past. Somewhere along the line, they lost all hope and all their ideals. Often, this is the attribute of a story with moral gray areas, and it creates some kind of strange empathy in us to learn of these events that made our once noble character and turned them into what they are today. And this archetype has been done countless times before, but I'd like to highlight one depiction that has so many common elements with this one that if we look at it, I think we might find the blueprint to Jinx. So just as a fun experiment, try to guess which fallen hero I'm hinting at. It's a very infamous one. The hero is raised in a broken family, uncertain of their parents' identity and finding other figures of authority to rely on. They get raised in the lowest class of people, taking dangerous jobs as a kid to stay alive. When the ultimate moment of truth comes, they feel like they can't stand by idly anymore, and they take action to have a chance at saving their loved ones.
I can help them.
In the process, they manage to destroy everything they once held close to their hearts. At this absolute lowest point, they get picked up by a morally dubious benefactor with a f***ed up face who feels this gaping void as a father figure of some sort. Thinking all of their loved ones are dead, which is not the case, but the evil mentor made them think so, they change name and virtually kill their own past self to become someone stronger. And after all the doubting and belittling, they finally get the recognition they deserve. And they are told this is their real inner beast. All that potential finally realized. Did you guess it? Let me know in the comments if you did. And if you thought of anyone else that I didn't think of, please let me know as well. Maybe you have better ideas for this. I feel like Silco and Jinx's relationship is also something we've seen before. Anyways, back to my point. Obviously, these analogies don't show a one-to-one correlation. It's not an adaptation after all. But if we want to get into an analytical frame of mind, we can relate to one of the most memorable damnation redemption arcs of modern media, the story of Anakin Skywalker. It would also be unfair to compare these two stories. They are constructed in fundamentally different ways. But at the heart of both shows is the fall of a tragic character. But how are these two stories the same? The obstacle in both is the dark side of our personality. Sometimes it may seem like an external threat, the attraction of the dark side, but it is soon recognized the dark side is internal. It's within the individual. Both stories use a hero who is calling out for the inner good of the fallen anti-hero. Both have a brief confrontation at the midpoint where they realize they are beyond the point of no return, but in the moment of truth decide to abandon the crucial mission to save them instead. Because in their words,
I have to try.
I could go on, but this is where it gets interesting to me. How do these stories differ, and what are the implications? I think we have to talk about two things: the approach to the protagonist's state of mind, and the ending of the story. I think Jinx's story speaks a lot about mental health struggles, which Anakin's really is not. Darth Vader is not exactly relatable for the longest time. He's presented as a monster, and you have to remember the order the movies came in. Any sympathy you might feel to New Hope Vader is just a projection from the prequel movies, but even then I think it's a major stretch to feel for Vader. In that movie, he is purely just an antagonist, but Jinx here feels like what New Hope Vader could have been like if the prequels were made first. She's immensely relatable, and knowing her past, we as the audience want what Luke wanted in Star Wars, to see the good in her. Additionally, Jinx's story really could start a conversation about mental health, and while her PTSD might be a bit over the top at times, there's still value to be found. From what I can tell, Jinx suffered a traumatic event, namely killing her entire family and being rightfully blamed for it, that resulted in a development of dissociative identity disorder and schizophrenia. Now, I'm no mental health professional, but Jinx's disease seems to have very low functioning episodes and very high functioning episodes. And sometimes the switch between those two is incredibly rapid, showing us what her triggers are. This is good attention to detail, even if at times it's a bit exaggerated for dramatic effect.
Are you real?
In media, the depiction of mental health in general is a bit overblown at times, and it's mostly for technical reasons. In this example, it's not like we can see how Jinx wakes up, prepares for the day, and reads a book or something, because that's just not cinematic. So we sometimes see her triggers and struggles, but what we don't see is how long her episodes are, how this affects her social life, or any other nuance to her condition. This makes the depiction a bit simplified, but just to be clear, I never claimed that this show was about mental health, but as a sub-theme, it's featured heavily. So I'm not saying this is a profound exploration of the topic or anything like that, but it's obviously a bit more detailed than in Anakin's case. And considering that I think they are fundamentally the same type of character, this angle is a welcome addition, in my opinion. As much as it is just movie madness, for lack of a better term, at least it's reflected upon. Darth Sidious shares some features of Silco. He manipulates Anakin without a care in the world, he tears him from his family, and urges him to follow his worst instincts. The Sith Lord's relationship to his apprentice is left enigmatic in Star Wars, of course. We never see a deep conversation between the two, but one thing we know for certain is, even though Palpatine treated Anakin as his own son, Vader is not loved by Sidious. This is where the depth of Silco's relationship with Jinx really pays off dramatically. We see the dynamic between them, we see the care, the trust, and the protection of each other, but we also see the deep-rooted codependency, insecurity, and the abuse of an uneven power dynamic between a mentally ill vulnerable child and a mentally stable, dominant adult. Not to mention, Silco adopted the daughter of the man he basically killed, and he got her in this vulnerable position in the first place. This is already predatory behavior, and there's of course the separating her from her family by lying thing, which is also manipulation 101, even if his intentions were protective in nature, which I'll happily accept, and he is trying to help her and protect her, to be fair. This is a valuable feature of the series. It shows dynamics that are just as relevant in our real life and in our own environment. Exploiting the weak and helpless for our own feelings of power and narcissism, God complexing it one mentally scarred child at a time, and thinking we are doing what's best for the other, forgetting the responsibility we have. This is something important to highlight in public discourse, and given that this show was #1 on Netflix for the longest time, they probably succeeded at that. Do I think more could have been done with this? Of course I do. But let's remember the massive amount of things Arcane is trying to do at once. At the end of the day, it's supposed to be a video game show, satisfying lore enthusiasts and casual viewers alike, while at the same time building like 10 plus characters development. It's really impressive that they could get this deep as it is. We'll talk about the actual fate of Jinx in a second, but I just want to highlight one thing here with Silco. Earlier, I talked about how neurotic and psychotic disorders are sometimes romanticized in media, and I feel like that's a problem, because it creates a desire to lean into mental illness, even when there could be a way out with health. I obviously mean this mostly for young and impressionable minds. Sometimes movies and shows refuse to admit to the pathology, and treat these problems as fun character traits, and worst of all, excusing immoral acts with it, or shaming people who condemn these abnormal behaviors, normalizing it by extension. Many viewers, when they see a relatable character, feel like there is beauty in being damaged, and very rarely does it feel like a sickness that is to be cured. Arcane, on the other hand, feels a bit like both. We see a lot of excuses brought up for Jinx throughout the series, but I think ultimately, this scene seals the deal.
No, I'm sorry.
I never would have given you to them. Not for anything. Don't cry. You're perfect.
Silco is excusing the unexcusable, and we understand the motive behind that from his point of view, and it makes perfect dramatic sense. But this scene does away with the delusion of Silco. It places responsibility on Jinx and her actions, and because Silco is not willing to hold her accountable, it almost feels like the viewer has to, especially because they made Silco so relatable. This to me ultimately does away with the desirability of Jinx's condition. At the end, she isn't justified in her actions. She doesn't feel empowered. If anything, this scene shows her powerlessness. Which takes us to the actual end of Jinx's story. In the beginning of this video I said, the dramatic question was, will Powder be whole again? From this point of view, the ending of course is entirely tragic. Powder succumbs to Jinx, and it seems like the last strand that tied her to Vi is severed. Personally, I see value in this ending, as it is rooted in our reality. The turn of Darth Vader into Anakin Skywalker is a touching story that I will always cherish, but the fact of the matter is, stories like Jinx's are happening all around us. Sick people left to their own devices and people unable to reconstruct their broken identities after a traumatic event. Sometimes, the struggles of mental health come to a bitter end. And that's just how it is. The story of Jinx is not complete, of course, so the ending is not a total downer. But for the time being, this hits a bit different. So, what have we learned today? I already mentioned in my last video, but this storyline feels like the skeleton Arcane was built upon. It is clever writing to make a split personality the protagonist of a show with duality as its theme, and the main sub-theme builds into and supports the creative vision of the series. It's also commendable how they don't reduce mental health struggles to a character trait, but actually make it dynamically develop with the story, as Jinx struggles with her past. It's by no means unique, or the deepest exploration of this topic, but it is doing a bit more than the average with the condition. They present the triggers, the high and low functioning episodes, the exploitation, but also the agency of those with psychological trauma, and they end on a rather realistic note. The creators gave us chances to empathize, but also raised the question of how much Jinx can be excused for. All in all, I really liked it. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please don't hesitate to give it a thumbs up, and if you subscribe, that's even better. As a new YouTuber, it's also very important to me to get honest feedback, so if you leave that in the comments, I will appreciate it a lot. Did you like this in-depth type of a video, or do you prefer the shorter ones from earlier, like the Witcher videos? Let me know, and take care. I'll see you in the next one. Special shout out to these patrons, and Berkue for being in the behind the scenes tier. Thank you guys.